At 2:10 a.m., a half-ton of stolen nuclear blueprints hurtled out of Tehran, while 1,700 kilometers away, U.S. sanctions snapped back and wiped $50 billion off Iran's oil revenue overnight. In that same breath, Iran's centrifuge count spiked past 10,000, shattering international trust. This is the story behind the Tehran nuclear archive heist, a data-driven raid that detonated Iran's credibility, upended global diplomacy, and set off an industrial centrifuge cascade no leader can contain. But if Mossad found the archive buried under 32 steel safes and 2 years of secrecy, what else did the world never see coming? The hidden war begins right here. February 2016. Unmarked trucks rumbled through Tehran's industrial outskirts at dawn. Inside, Iran's nuclear program heads were moving more than just office supplies. 32 steel safes, each weighing over a ton, were hauled off government property and stacked in a single warehouse in the Shohrabad district, a place with no history, no Ministry of Defense ties, and no official record of any nuclear relevance. The orders came from the top. Project Ahmad documentation, blueprints, and electronic records, all evidence of Iran's past weapons design work. Vanished from scientific institutes and military sites, sealed behind reinforced doors, and left under a thin layer of dust among rows of machine parts and spare tires. The warehouse's disguise was deliberate. No security cameras on the street, no guards posted overnight. The goal was invisibility. Iran's nuclear directors, including Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, calculated that hidden in plain sight was safer than a fortified compound ringed by patrols. The archive's new home sat 23 kilometers from downtown Tehran, far from IAEA eyes and well outside the perimeter of declared nuclear facilities. Everything about the move betrayed a strategy. Keep the world guessing, keep the program's history intact, and keep the most damning secrets locked away where only a handful knew to look. This was not just about hiding documents. It was about preserving the DNA of a bomb project, one safe at a time. Every night in Shohrabad, the clock reset at 7 a.m. That was when the security team arrived, unlocking the iron side gate and starting their rounds. Until then, the warehouse stood alone. No guards, no patrols, just silence and concrete. For 6.5 hours, from just after midnight until sunrise, the building was nothing more than a shadow in an industrial maze. Tehran's nuclear directors had insisted on this low profile. A round-the-clock guard might draw questions, and even a single patrol car could tip off a curious neighbor or a rival agency. So the most sensitive secrets of Project Ahmad slept each night behind steel doors and cold safes, protected only by darkness and a gamble on obscurity. Mossad's surveillance logs captured the rhythm. The guard's white sedan always rolled up at 7 sharp. Shift changes followed a script, never deviating. There were no surprise inspections, no night watchman, not even a stray light left burning after the evening lockup. For months, Israeli operatives recorded the pattern, counting headlights, marking each arrival and departure, building a minute-by-minute map of the warehouse's vulnerability. On paper, it was an insignificant detail. In reality, it was the linchpin, a 6.5-hour window for a break-in, safe-cracking, and escape. No margin for error. The plan would depend not on high-tech gadgets or brute force, but on a gap in human routine, a pocket of time invisible to anyone who wasn't watching closely enough. A Farsi-speaking Mossad operative arrived in Tehran months after the warehouse's steel doors first closed. Blending into the Shorabad sprawl, she strolled the district's cracked sidewalks in a plain chador, a silent observer with a gift for vanishing into crowds. Her companion played the part of an older cousin, never straying far. Every walk sharpened the map. The warehouse's back lot, the dented gate, the street lamp that flickered out by midnight. From a rented sedan parked half a block away, miniature cameras tracked the rhythm of early morning arrivals and the quiet departures each evening. Over 2 years, Mossad's field team gathered hours of guard shift footage, each frame catalogued and reviewed in Tel Aviv. Signal intercepts mapped out the perimeter's alarm relays, exposing panels disguised as electrical boxes. Human sources, some embedded inside Iran's nuclear bureaucracy, tipped off Mossad to each adjustment in routine. The brief repairs, the rare delivery trucks, even the day a junior guard lingered after sunrise. All of it fed into a growing dossier. Lists of names, home addresses, the make and model of every car that parked outside those iron doors. By the end of 2017, Mossad could predict the guards' cigarette breaks within 3 minutes. No trap wires, no bomb dogs, no random patrols. The security system was built on routine, and every routine had a crack. The night of the operation would demand perfection, but by then, every variable had been measured and counted, down to the last second of darkness before 7 a.m., January 31st, 2018, 22:30 Greenwich Mean Time. Mossad's lead vehicle rolled into position on the edge of Tehran's Shorabad district. The air was thick, motionless, broken only by the low hum of distant traffic and the click of radios inside 2 unmarked sedans. This was the insertion hour, the minute when precision, months in the making, snapped into motion. Under 24 agents, split among drivers, safe specialists, and counter-surveillance teams, watched the second hand crawl past the half-hour mark. Each agent was already accounted for. The point team at the warehouse gate, a lookout posted at the intersection 2 streets over, and trailing support along the planned extraction route. There was no margin for stragglers. Minutes mattered. The security gap Mossad had mapped, 6 hours and 30 minutes of unguarded silence, was ticking away. At exactly 22:30 GMT, teams fanned out on foot, faces down, hands stuffed in work gloves, moving fast, but never running. In the back lot, a rusted rolling door hung open, just wide enough for 2 agents to slip inside, dragging reinforced duffel bags and custom-cut tool rolls. The rest took up their marks, each with a job and a timetable burned into memory. Every roll had been rehearsed in Tel Aviv's mock-up warehouse and drilled to the second. The clock showed 1:02 Tehran time. Inside, a safecracker unwrapped a thermal lance, glancing once at the datasheet tied to his wrist. Across the alley, a second team monitored police radio chatter, scanning for any hint of a disturbance. The lead agent, an electronics specialist, set a timer on his phone. 5 hours and 28 minutes until the first guard car arrived at 7 a.m. local. No alarms had tripped, no dogs barked. The only sound was the scrape of rubber soles on concrete and the faint click of a lockpick in a side entrance. The timing was not an accident. January's end gave the longest stretch of darkness, stretching the window Mossad needed. Iranian guards, always punctual, would park their white sedan at 7 sharp. Never before. Mossad's team would be gone well before then, leaving behind nothing but scorched steel and a warehouse emptier by half a ton. Not a single agent was inside the building who didn't need to be. Everyone else worked the perimeter, staged to intercept, distract, or vanish if the plan wobbled. Under the warehouse's flickering emergency light, watches synced and eyes fixed on the minute hand, the operation began. Every step from this moment forward would be dictated by the clock. From safe to safe, from document stack to duffel, the agents moved with a discipline born of necessity. If anyone hesitated, the window would slam shut. No second attempts, no backup plan. Mossad's break-in had begun, and the countdown had started. The warehouse's steel doors were only the first barrier. Inside, Mossad's safe specialists worked against time, heat, and the threat of discovery. The tool at the center of their plan was the thermal lance, a torch engineered to channel oxygen through metal rods, producing a flame that reached 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. At these temperatures, reinforced steel surrendered in minutes. The cutting rate, tested and logged in Tel Aviv, averaged less than 12 minutes per safe, provided the operator kept the lance angle precise and the torch moving steadily along the seams. Overheating would trigger fire suppression or melt lock mechanisms onto the documents inside, so every cut was mapped and practiced on the replica safe back in Israel, down to the millimeter. Before the first lance struck metal, a second team unspooled compact jammers, custom-built for the operation. Each jammer tuned itself automatically, scanning local frequencies and replicating the expected signal output of the warehouse's alarm feeds. Instead of dead air or obvious static, the alarm panel in the Iranian monitoring station displayed a gentle heartbeat. Normal, steady, untouched. This illusion bought the team precious silence. Any interruption or alarm blip would have triggered a call-out by the IRGC's Rapid Response Unit. The jammer's battery life, measured in field tests, offered a hard cap, just over 4 hours before the risk of signal drift. Mossad's ops planner had written this figure in red on every checklist. Every piece of equipment, from the lances to the document scanners, had been rehearsed with the same urgency that would define the real break-in. Mossad constructed a full-scale mock-up of the Shorabad warehouse on the outskirts of Tel Aviv, importing identical steel safes from Europe by way of a dummy company. The layout, the spacing between aisles, even the fire extinguisher mounts. Nothing was left to improvisation. Agents drilled for weeks, blindfolded and timed, opening safes in darkness, memorizing duffel bag loads by weight alone. When a safe took longer than 15 minutes in rehearsal, the plan changed. Priority would shift to the next, and the slower safe would be left sealed. Inside the Tehran warehouse, every second was rationed. As the lances traced their white-hot arcs, safe doors buckled and fell away, revealing folders, disks, and blueprints bundled in colored string. The extraction team, gloved and masked against the fumes, loaded each document stack into heat-proof satchels, each one tagged and cataloged according to a code drilled into memory. The jammers hummed quietly near the exit, while a lookout updated the perimeter team every 15 minutes. No movement, no headlights, no radio traffic beyond the usual static. The only threat was the clock. In all, 6 safes were breached, each one yielding more than 9,000 pages of blueprints and field notes, along with shelves of compact discs sealed in plastic. Every phase of the operation was chained to the technical tools Mossad had smuggled in, piece by piece. If a lance failed, the backup torch took its place. If the jammer's battery flagged, the team had under 10 minutes to finish and vanish. These margins had been calculated, tested, and drilled. They were now being spent, minute by minute, until the last safe's hinge dropped and the duffel bags, nearly half a ton heavier than when the team arrived, were zipped and hauled back into the darkness. The archive was open, and the technical war for its secrets was already won. 6 duffel bags now held 55,000 pages and 183 disks, half a ton of secrets, stacked and zipped. At 4:37 a.m., 2 Mossad operatives keyed open the back gate as a lead truck rumbled into the alley, engine low, headlights off. Every minute counted. The convoy had rehearsed its exit down the same side street, each turn mapped by months of surveillance. The lead vehicle carried the archive. 3 decoy trucks, hired in Tehran days before, idled in side lanes, ready to peel away at staggered intervals and scatter through the city's arteries. Each decoy carried weighted crates and blank files, paperwork stamped with Ministry of Trade seals. Nothing that would slow a checkpoint for long, but enough to split any chase. The archive truck merged onto the ring road before sunrise, heading northwest. Iranian police logs later clocked a wave of freight trucks crossing the city line in that same hour. But Mossad had mapped the blind spots. Stretches with no toll cameras, faded license plate scanners, and sleepy guard posts. By 5:10 a.m., the first decoy peeled off toward Karaj. Another hooked south for Qom, drawing the attention of unmarked sedans that trailed after, radios crackling. The real cargo pressed on, bound for the border with Azerbaijan, a route chosen for its mix of industrial traffic and patchwork jurisdiction. The truck's false floor, welded and painted to match the factory chassis, concealed the archive under a layer of machine parts. Customs paperwork listed nothing of interest. Back in Tehran, 2 agents in a rented sedan relayed updates to command. At every checkpoint, the archive truck's driver followed the same script. Faked bills of lading, a tired shrug, eyes fixed on the road. If questioned, he had a number to call. A local fixer briefed to vouch for a late-night shipment to a steelworks near the border. Meanwhile, the original document's most critical pages were already in Tel Aviv. Field scanners had digitized thousands of files during the operation, sending encrypted packets out of Iran via a mesh of short-burst uplinks and commercial satellite relays. By the time the physical cargo crossed into Azerbaijan, Mossad's analysis teams had begun tagging and cataloging the first wave of data, building a blueprint of Iran's program before the hunt even started. The last truck crossed into Azerbaijani territory before noon. Customs officers distracted by false tips about a stolen car ring operating in the opposite lane. Within hours, Iranian security realized what had happened. But by then, Mossad's decoys had vanished, and the archive was already out of reach. The half-ton of secrets slipped from Tehran's grasp on a back road, the world's most sensitive nuclear intelligence now in foreign hands. These documents can't be unstolen. Tehran's credibility will only decay further. April 30th, 2018, Jerusalem. The auditorium lights dimmed as Benjamin Netanyahu stepped onto the stage, his hand sweeping over shelves stacked with black folders and 183 discs, all stamped with Farsi script. For the next 30 minutes, Israel's prime minister became the world's lead witness. Behind him, a wall of secrets, 55,000 printed pages, each one taken from Tehran's forgotten warehouse. Every folder filed, every compact disc indexed, each one pulled from a safe, cracked open less than 3 months earlier. Netanyahu spoke without notes. He pointed to diagrams, schematics for neutron initiators, blueprints for missiles meant to carry a compact nuclear core. On a giant screen, a video played, grainy footage of Iranian engineers, date stamped in the early 2000s, assembling components at a site near Parchin. The documents were not summaries or intelligence reports. Every item was primary evidence. folders labeled in Farsi, technical drawings annotated in Mohsen Fakhrizade's own handwriting, serial numbers matched to metal containers photographed in the archive. The scale dwarfed anything previously revealed about Iran's nuclear ambitions. Each shelf held more than the total document haul from North Korea's Yongbyon plant in 2007, a fact left hanging in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Netanyahu's narrative moved with methodical precision. He read a line, then summoned up a facsimile, a letter from Iran's defense ministry instructing scientists to conceal weaponization activities from United Nations inspectors. Another, a PowerPoint slide, redacted only to protect Israeli sources, showing a bomb's detonation sequence mapped second by second. These were not accusations. Each was a physical artifact, logged and photographed by Mossad within 210 minutes of leaving the Shorabad warehouse. The presentation did not drift into speculation. Dates and figures built the case. 2003. Iran's Project Ahmad, ordered to design and produce 5 warheads, each with 10 kiloton TNT yield. 2015. Directive to preserve all records so future generations would have everything necessary to resume. Names matched to faces. Fakhrizadeh as architect, Rouhani as overseer. 183 compact discs, Netanyahu noted, each holding thousands of scanned documents and internal videos, now in Israeli custody. The evidence covered not only plans, but the ministry's deception playbook, meeting minutes devoted to rehearsing responses for IAEA inspectors, instructions on how to synchronize stories across departments, and lists of contaminated facilities flagged for cleanup before visits. The technical content landed with force. Cross-section diagrams of uranium deuteride initiators, a component used exclusively in nuclear arms. Maps of tunnel networks at Parchin, blueprints for a blast chamber designed to withstand a nuclear yield, each visual accompanied by metadata, author, date, project number. Netanyahu's voice rose only once, reciting from a document. The aim is to produce an arsenal of weapons to be stored for future contingencies. Every minute, the display returned to quantity. The folders, coded, color-banded, stacked 6 high, spanned the length of the stage. 66 folders per shelf, each containing a complete section of the Ahmad project: metallurgy, weaponization, missile integration, field logistics. The compact discs, labeled and sequenced, offered digital backups and original video. The audience, a mix of foreign diplomats and intelligence officials, watched as images rolled. Farsi labels, Iranian government stamps, handwritten notes in blue ink. No summaries, no analysis, just the raw material of past intent. Near the half-hour mark, Netanyahu paused in front of the archive. Tonight, I am here to tell you one thing. Iran lied. Big time. The black folders and discs behind him froze the claim in place. No translation required. For the first time, the world saw not rumors or satellite imagery, but the source code of a nuclear weapons program, packed into cargo bags and flown out of Tehran. The address ended, but the folders remained. The archive's contents were now public knowledge. In less than half an hour, Iran's narrative collapsed under the weight of its own records. The shelves stood as a verdict. These documents cannot be unstolen. May 8, 2018, Washington. Donald Trump stood in the diplomatic reception room and read out the order. The United States would leave the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the Iran nuclear deal. Within minutes, the Treasury Department began reimposing sanctions that had been frozen for nearly 3 years. Oil revenue, which had brought Tehran tens of billions in foreign currency each year, was about to vanish from Iran's reach. Banks touching Iranian transactions faced new penalties. Boeing's $17 billion aircraft contract with Iran was dead within hours. Container ships, insurance underwriters, refinery executives, every company with a U.S. nexus began scanning risk reports and legal briefs. The financial world responded with a single calculation. Exposure to Iran now meant exposure to U.S. law, asset freezes, and blacklisting. The sanctions didn't just hit the usual suspects. They targeted oil, banking, metals, shipping, even Iranian reals held abroad. The White House press release cited newly discovered evidence, a direct reference to the folders and disks displayed in Jerusalem just 8 days earlier. Trump's statement left no ambiguity. Iran lied. The deal is defective at its core. The Office of Foreign Assets Control began updating its specially designated nationals list, sanctioning more than 700 individuals and entities by November. Iranian oil exports, which had averaged over 2.5 million barrels per day in April, dropped below half that by the end of the year. The rial's value collapsed. Between May and December 2018, the World Bank estimated that Iran's economy shrank by 3.9%, more than any year since the Iran-Iraq War. Europe's leaders, blindsided by the U.S. withdrawal, rushed to salvage what remained of the JCPOA. France, Germany, and the United Kingdom issued a joint statement vowing to protect legitimate European business with Iran. Brussels moved quickly to revive an old legal weapon, the so-called blocking statute. On August 7, 2018, Commission Delegated Regulation, EU, 2018-1100 entered force. The text was clear. No judgment of a court or tribunal, and no decision of an administrative authority located outside the Union giving effect, directly or indirectly, to the laws specified in the Annex, shall be recognized or enforceable in any manner. The blocking statute threatened penalties for any EU company that complied with U.S. sanctions against Iran, nullified foreign court decisions in Europe, and gave companies the right to recover damages from American authorities or firms enforcing those sanctions. European operators were required to inform Brussels within 30 days of any U.S. sanctions impact, a surveillance mechanism embedded in the law itself. The practical effect was chaos. Major European corporations with U.S. business, Total, Siemens, Maersk, announced plans to exit Iran within weeks. Smaller firms without dollar exposure tried to keep trading, but banks refused to process payments. The European Investment Bank was authorized to facilitate business with Iran, but no major institution risked triggering secondary sanctions. The EU's instrument in support of trade exchanges, designed as a sanctions-free barter mechanism, processed only a handful of transactions before stalling. European banks, fearing U.S. penalties, cut Iran off from SWIFT transactions regardless of the blocking statute's promises. In Tehran, the government denounced American economic warfare and threatened to restart uranium enrichment beyond JCPOA limits. Hassan Rouhani, Iran's president, demanded guarantees from Europe, but the numbers told the story. Iran's oil exports fell from 2.5 million barrels per day in April 2018 to under 650,000 by December. Black market sales became the regime's lifeline. The International Monetary Fund reported a $50 billion revenue shortfall within the first year after sanctions snapped back. In the diplomatic arena, the split was absolute. The United States and Israel went from intelligence sharing to open coordination on economic and military pressure. European capitals, while refusing to recognize U.S. sanctions, found their legal defenses toothless in the face of American market dominance. The European Union's blocking statute, once invoked as Europe's shield, proved brittle against the Treasury's reach. Iran's economy, battered by lost oil income and frozen assets, began hemorrhaging capital and credit. No appeals, no workaround, no legal maneuver could undo the new reality. The archive's public exposure detonated the nuclear deal, and the rules of engagement had been rewritten for the entire region. June 2021, Vienna. The International Atomic Energy Agency submitted its quarterly report, and the numbers stunned even veteran inspectors. Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium had reached 3,241 kilograms, with 62.8 kilograms refined to 60% uranium-235, the highest level ever produced by Iran outside a weapons program. Under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, enrichment above 3.67% was forbidden. The new figures shattered every previous limit and put Iran's technical breakout time, the period needed to produce enough fuel for a single bomb, at less than 3 months. The report detailed cascades of IR-2M and IR-4 centrifuges spinning underground at Natanz and Fordow. Inspectors noted the rapid expansion. By late spring, Iran had installed more than 2,700 advanced machines, each one far more efficient than the IR-1s permitted under the nuclear deal. The IAEA's tracking logs showed that between May and June, Iran fed uranium hexafluoride gas into these cascades at rates that outpaced anything seen since the deal's signing. Cameras inside the plants, once streaming encrypted footage to Vienna, had gone dark in February after Iran restricted access, leaving the agency blind to daily operations. The enrichment jump was not theoretical. Physical samples collected by inspectors at Fordow contained particles measuring just under 63% uranium-235, a concentration rarely seen outside military stockpiles. Specialists compared this to 20%, the highest level Iran had reached before 2013, and to the 90% required for weapons. The technical leap, achieved in less than 6 months, compressed what had once taken Iran years into a matter of weeks. For comparison, before the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran's largest stockpile of enriched uranium had hovered near 2,800 kilograms, with enrichment capped at 20% and all higher-level work frozen under international monitoring. Now, the logbooks showed Iran's program had grown by nearly a third in less than a year, with material piling up in storage tanks shielded behind reinforced walls. The IAEA's language remained clinical. Inspectors listed precise quantities, dates, and isotope ratios, mapping each technical deviation from the agreement. But the implications ran deeper. Iran had installed a second cascade of IR-6 centrifuges at Fordow, machines capable of surpassing every previous enrichment milestone. The agency noted that these cascades operated without proper safeguards. No functioning cameras, no real-time access, no environmental sampling since the latest restrictions took effect. Requests for clarifications resulted in weeks of silence or redacted responses. The report's appendix included a timeline. February 23rd, Iran halted implementation of the additional protocol, cutting off daily inspector access. March, centrifuge installation accelerated. April, The Natanz facility suffered a mysterious sabotage, only to restore production using newer, faster machines. By June, the stockpile had passed every declared limit. The numbers forced a recalibration in every Western capital. Washington analysts mapped out timelines for potential breakout. In Paris and Berlin, diplomats referenced the IAEA's June figures: 60% enrichment, 3,200 kilograms in storage, as the basis for emergency consultations. Israeli intelligence, reading the same data, flagged the risk. Once Iran crossed the 60% threshold, upgrading to weapons grade was a matter of days, not months. The cascade diagrams submitted to the IAEA revealed technical mastery that Iran had previously denied possessing. Inspectors on the ground faced new restrictions. Their field notes recorded missed appointments, unexplained delays at facility gates, and technical logs left unsigned. In one notable incident, inspectors visiting the Isfahan conversion plant were barred from reviewing feedstock balances, a routine check under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. More concerning was the discovery of uranium particles at undisclosed sites, suggesting clandestine work beyond declared facilities. The International Atomic Energy Agency's quarterly summary, dated June 7, 2021, concluded that the agency's verification and monitoring activities have been seriously undermined. Iran's official response cited economic pressure and unfulfilled European promises as justification for exceeding limits, but the technical progress was unmistakable. The 60% material produced at Natanz and Fordow matched specifications once documented in the stolen Shorabad archive. Internal memos from Vienna's International Atomic Energy Agency headquarters described the situation as fluid, with inspectors unable to confirm the precise status of Iran's enrichment operations for the first time since the deal's implementation. The new reality was defined by numbers: Iran's enriched uranium stockpile, its cascade count, its enrichment level, all documented in International Atomic Energy Agency logs, all in open breach of every previous international commitment. What had begun as a slow erosion of limits in 2019 now registered as a clear technical breach, with implications for the entire region's security calculus. The cascade halls in Natanz and Fordow now ran day and night, their contents largely invisible to international oversight. As the summer of 2021 unfolded, the International Atomic Energy Agency's reports became the primary source of truth, each one spelling out a new line crossed, a new technical achievement, a new warning to policymakers tracking every gram and every percentage point. The inspectors' data left no room for ambiguity. Iran's enrichment program was no longer constrained by diplomatic agreements, but by technical ambition and the speed of its own centrifuge cascades. November 27, 2020, a black sedan rolled through Absard's main road, east of Tehran. Inside, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh sat flanked by security vehicles. Within seconds, gunfire erupted, controlled by a remote system, programmed and activated from hundreds of kilometers away. Fakhrizadeh, Iran's top nuclear scientist, was dead before his bodyguards reached the car. The man whose name appeared on Project Ahmad blueprints, whose signature inked the archive's most sensitive folders, was gone. The machine that executed him, later identified as a custom-built automated weapon, smuggled in piece by piece, left the country's nuclear command without its architect. Fakhrizadeh's assassination was not the first. Since 2010, at least 4 Iranian nuclear scientists had been targeted and killed. Each time, the operation was surgical. A magnetic bomb under a car, a motorcycle hit and run, or a masked attacker disappearing into Tehran's morning crowds. Iran's security services blamed Israel for each strike, but the methods pointed to a deeper intelligence, the kind made possible by the Tehran archive, with its dossiers listing every scientist's role, travel habits, and daily routine. The archive named Fakhrizadeh as the Keystone, the only man with full knowledge of the cascade designs, weapons modeling, and procurement trails that formed the backbone of Iran's nuclear ambition. In the weeks after the Absard hit, Iran's nuclear program did not slow. Instead, technical bulletins announced new centrifuge cascades at Fordow and Natanz, and enrichment rates ticked upward. But the leadership vacuum remained. Internal security memos admitted that no successor could match Fakhrizadeh's project memory or his network of loyal engineers, many of whom now requested transfers to civilian posts or left the country altogether. The impact rippled beyond the laboratory walls. Foreign intelligence agencies logged a sharp drop in communications traffic between Iran's military research units, signals that, according to Western analysts, reflected confusion and compartmentalization, not resilience. Markets too scanned for aftershocks. On the day of the assassination, Brent crude closed at $46.43 per barrel. Over the following 2 weeks, prices edged up to $49.32, a climb of under $3, modest by historic standards. Unlike the January 2020 Soleimani strike, which spiked futures by more than 4% overnight, the response was muted. Oil traders tracked OPEC decisions, COVID-19 vaccine developments, and supply forecasts from the Energy Information Administration. In analyst reports, the killing of Fakhrizadeh appeared as a footnote, not a trigger. The world's risk calculus weighed potential disruption against the reality. Iran's oil still flowed, tankers still left Karg Island, and military escalation remained on a short leash. Yet inside Iran, the message landed with force. Following the archive's exposure and the relentless campaign against its key scientists, the regime shifted tactics. Security at nuclear sites doubled, with new layers of counter-surveillance and internal vetting. Procurement channels tightened, foreign travel for technical staff dropped by half. But every adjustment betrayed a single fear. No secret, no facility, no individual was untouchable. Each engineer now worked under the shadow of the archive's reach, knowing that every detail, every phone number, every alias might already be cataloged in a foreign database. The regional security map began to shift as well. Gulf states, watching the fallout, accelerated intelligence-sharing protocols with Israel. Saudi and Emirati officials, long wary of Iran's breakout potential, now weighed the risk of an arms race triggered by a single scientist's death. In Tel Aviv, Mossad's directors circulated memos claiming that the pressure on Iran's nuclear brain trust was as effective as any sabotage against centrifuge halls. Across European capitals, security briefings warned of retaliation, but the strikes never came. Tehran's leadership threatened retribution, but the pattern held: covert attrition, not open war. Fakhrizadeh's name, once whispered only in classified briefings, now anchored public obituaries and United Nations debates. His assassination, enabled by intelligence harvested from the Tehran raid, closed the chapter on Iran's most prolific weapons designer. The effects extended well beyond any laboratory or underground hall. In the calculus of regional power, The removal of a single scientist, targeted with precision and deniability, delivered a message. The archive's exposure did not just reveal secrets. It made key custodians of those secrets vulnerable, one by one. The consequences would play out not in the headlines of oil price spikes, but in the silent, ongoing erosion of a program's institutional memory and its ability to regenerate under pressure. The technical blueprints could be duplicated, the architects could not. When Mossad extracted 55,000 pages and 183 CDs from the Shorabad warehouse on January 31, 2018, it exposed Iran's undeclared nuclear activities with forensic precision. The documents revealed hidden weaponization work, years of systematic concealment, and a technical depth that contradicted official statements to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Yet, large sections of the archive remain classified, and the full chain of command behind Project Ahmad is still undisclosed. In the wake of the heist, the U.S. reimposed sanctions on May 8, 2018, wiping out $50 billion in Iranian oil revenue, while Iran's uranium enrichment surged to 60%, U-235, by June 2021. European Union and Iran trade collapsed. Gulf states accelerated normalization with Israel, and Chinese-Iranian security cooperation intensified. Oil futures remain volatile, tracking every diplomatic tremor since. The evidence is clear. The Tehran archive raid permanently altered regional alliances, economic flows, and nuclear oversight. The vault may be empty, but the fallout is still mushrooming.